Good morning, everybody. So, I don't think did any of you attend the national TA call that Greg Core leads last Thursday? Naomi's trying to remember last Thursday. I saw that look on your face. What was last Thursday? I know, because we had a day off right after it. Anyways, so good. So then this will not be duplicating. So one of the things in SIG Network, the group that supports the SPDIG grantees, one of the things we do is make introductions a little bit more fun or interesting. Because has everyone heard of Chad Littlefield, of We and Me? So Chad Littlefield is someone I follow on social media and I get emails, and I'll respond to emails and he'll help me with things, which is great. But he's a big consultant for, he gets paid a lot of money for doing these things, and then he just helps me out. Thank you, Rebecca. And so Chad Littlefield talks about how much time we lose when we're in the room, whether it be virtual or physical, in the room with folks and not getting to know them during that time, right? Not building relationship, not sharing something that might be useful to them. He uses an example of a teacher who waited till the class bell rang before she even looked at the students. You're wasting all that time. They could be building a relationship. So one of the things that we do, I found myself, we have a lot of speakers for SIG Network for the SPDIGs, and I am so bored when I read people's bios out loud. Unless you actually went to the same school as them, it's just not very interesting. Build some credibility, and it's not that you shouldn't have a bio available, it's just reading it out loud. And so we found some interesting ways for people to introduce themselves. And one way that we've been using for a while, and I'll put it in the chat in case anyone wants to grab it, is the 4 H's. Has anyone ever heard of this one before? It's not common. I borrowed it from T. Rowe Price. History, hero, heartbreak, and hope. And it sounds very long, but it can go fast, as in, I was a special education teacher in California. I got taught whole reading and whole math, which was not a benefit to my students who had disabilities or anyone else. My hero has been Jeffrey Canada, because he started the Harlem Children's Zone and understands how to weave he does the braiding, the blending of the funds, and thinks about the whole child and the whole family and the whole neighborhood. And I think it's wonderful. My heartbreak has been, how teachers don't feel supported right now, and loss of great personnel. And my hope is groups like this group brings me a lot of hope. You all are dedicated, you're trying to do your work better, you're reaching more people every day. And I love that we're having more of an impact. So there's the 4 H's. And then I want 2 truths and a dream is, could be about your personal life or your work or a combination of the two, but the dream means you get to share a goal that you have, a big goal. And then the last one is 1 bucket list item. And that's the one people mainly choose to do because it's just a little bit easier. You have it right at the tip of your mind usually. And so if you all want to use your mic or use the chat and just share about yourself using one of those stems, introduction stems, that would be great.
Well, this is Sherry, and I suppose I'm going to do 2 truths and a dream, but I guess like the third truth is I'll always jump in. So, okay.
I love that
anyway. But the 2 truths I was actually going to come in with is I am the most extroverted introvert you'll ever meet. And I have a lot of expertise in the performing arts outside of my education background. So I do onstage work, and probably the best stage manager you've ever seen in the amateur world. And my dream is I'm currently working towards my doctorate in education. And so as a gray-haired grad student, that's really been quite a journey for me.
That's wonderful. But you know how to use technology, so
Yes.
that stereotype does not fit. And we call them mature students. Um, and riding the Oregon Trail from Mary, I'm thinking that's a bike ride, which means I'd love to go with you. Great. Anyone else want to share?
I might just
Haley.
add, it's
Okay. Yes,
off-road.
please. Oh,
So it's
wow.
off-road. So it's all single track and gravel road
Mary,
riding.
I'm
So,
very impressed.
and I
And
think
Mary,
it's
you'll have
like
to look out for
600
the
miles.
dysentery and all the other things that happen on the Oregon Trail.
Very good. All right. And Haley, welcome. She's taken over. Shelby Morgan, I think, is leaving National Center of Deaf Blindness, and she's taken over. Haley, we're very glad you're here. New Zealand. It's a good bucket list item. It's far.
Talking about hope, Angelica has a baby. Oh, so
Ah.
Yes. I have a little 2-month-old with me, so I'm back and working. Oh, let's get her in screen.
That 2-month-old is very
uh,
healthy. That's
Yeah,
a huge
she's
two-month-old.
my biggest baby. I guess from some of my truths, two truths. I have 4 twins that are just turned 2 yesterday. And then Savannah is our little miracle. Not to get into too much detail, but I had my tubes tied and we got a little present afterwards. So nothing's ever 100%.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
She's
Thank
lovely.
you.
I think she's enjoying it too.
Yeah, she's all my kids are used to these virtual meetings now, all COVID babies. So I was with Naomi at the Irish Center. So she's used to always seeing a little baby head pop up.
And I've been wanting to meet this one. So
Yeah, she's
I'm
here.
so glad we got to.
Yeah, thanks for letting me share her.
Yes, we're glad you're here.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks for folks who shared. It was good to get to know you all a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca and Eliana, who will be leading the rest of the meeting.
Well, welcome everybody. It is hopefully a beautiful fall where you are located today. Just to kind of bring us back to where we left off, we had been discussing, or part of your homework was to think about how your organization or center reacts to inappropriate comments on things like social media, or how are you handling that? And I think, and beyond the negative, but just false information that might be posted as well, right? We thought this might be kind of an important topic to lift back up, to kind of reground us back in our last meeting when we met in September, but also heading into an election year. Things have a tendency to get a little ramped up in that regard as well. So we are going to head into breakout groups to discuss a few of these items, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the prompts, and then we'll also put them in the chat. So as we are headed into breakouts, we want you to talk about any inappropriate comments or interactions that you had via dissemination efforts. So for example, CoP Center recently had one where it was completely inappropriate and was spreading false information on an event we were sharing. And as a team, we discussed what is our policy, because we didn't have one, right? So we didn't have a policy at our particular center around how to handle misinformation or inappropriate comments. In this particular situation, we walked through it as a team. We all agreed it was totally appropriate to delete the comment and actually block the user, because as part of the process. That may not be the case for everybody. Might not be appropriate depending on the situation. So just take a minute or two to reflect on what's been going on. Have you had any inappropriate comments? How did your center handle the situation? Or does your center or organization have a plan when this occurs? That's kind of going to be the basis of where you're going within your breakout room. So I'm going to give you about, let's do 2 or 3 minutes to do some self-reflection, just in case you're coming in not necessarily ready to go and might need those few minutes to ground yourself, and then we'll put you into breakout rooms. So let's do 2 minutes. to do some self-reflection. As you're finishing up your thoughts around around inappropriate comments and communications and things of that nature in your small groups, talk about has your organization been able to come to a decision on how to handle this? Even if you have not been involved, it could happen, right? It could easily happen. So what is your process? What might be helpful to you as a resource to see examples? You might want documents sent to you. Or a big one from my perspective is the process or policy you discussed written down? And the reason why I say written down is within CoP's work around implementation, a lot of agencies and organizations have informal policies and practices, and they're never written down. So when people leave, it gets lost with them, right? So is the process written down? Is it not? And what we'd like to do as you head into your small groups is we do have our Padlet. If you have any resources or strategies, go ahead and dump them right in this Padlet, even as part of your conversation. I just want us to keep lifting this up as kind of a bank for all of our resources. And Shauna did just put that in the chat for us. So head into your breakout groups. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to have this quick conversation, and then we'll be back. Okay, so welcome back. Is there any key nuggets, anything you would like to share out? Please feel free to unmic. We're a small enough group. We can see each other. Unmic, what were your conversations like? Do we have resources to share? What has been your experience lately? And I have really good wait time.
I can jump in real quick because ours was easy. We have not run into this experience, our little group. I was in a group with Kelly and Mary, and it didn't sound like any of us have run into any negative feedback. But we sounds like we're also very low users of social media platforms as well. So it's mostly a pushing out of information and not a lot of feedback coming back in. So we haven't ran into that issue yet.
Our group was very similar. And also I brought up the topic of not necessarily the negative comments and the feedback, but the bots that sometimes start commenting and having to deal with that and how frustrating that is, because once you think you get rid of the bot, then there's another one that comes back with the same comments. So that's more frustrating than the negative inappropriate reactions. We haven't had that, but again, we are a smaller center at CITL and we don't have a lot of social media presence.
We talked a little bit about the bots too and how they proliferate, and it can be really hard to manage. And we've been lucky. Yeah, Corey just echoed what I said in the chat. Thanks, Corey. We've been lucky that we haven't had a negative comments so far, but Dana actually shared some good stuff with us. Not to put you on the spot, Dana.
Are you handing the baton, Kate? So we had
I am. Thanks, Dana.
I'll play. We haven't had a problem on our social media channels for the project that I attend this for, but on another project we did. And while we kind of figured out, it was I would call it like just a disgruntled negative Nancy comment, not really had incorrect information, and it was grumbling, kind of nasty grumbling, but nothing that impacted somebody else. So it wasn't directed at anyone else or potentially directed at anyone else. And while we were scrambling around to like figure out how to handle this and identify the ways, a lot of first of all, we got a ton of traffic because of it. So it's like any attention is good attention, right? Unfortunately. And then we had a lot of people hop on and respond to her with kindness and corrected information or positive responses. So in that way, our followers handled that. And then what we ended up doing was we did respond with the, oh, we're sorry you feel that, that kind of placating thing. But then we created Friday Facts. So every Friday we had a post that was about an actual fact about the program or the project and so we kind of indirectly and over time did something to kind of flip the script on that a little bit so that people were getting correct information. And then the other thing we did is we went up the channels of our Strat Communications. I'm at a university and they have a whole process and they said that's bullying. And so they said, if that happens again, let us know because we have a whole process for that. So we didn't block her and we didn't ban her and we didn't take that down. We just kindly corrected it and then moved forward on that and let our people handle that. So if you have people in your group, there may be a process already for that if you're in a big bureaucracy like I am.
Thank you for sharing. That's a really good example. And I appreciate the Friday Facts. That's a fun way to approach it. All right. Any other share outs from your breakout time together? Any other resources, strategies, things you discussed?
I was, hi, this is Andrew from NCEO. We talked about not the commenting, but the reviews. And fortunately, our organization's never had this happen, but in another group outside of work that I belong to, dozens, if not more, just positive reviews. And then one person got on there and said a whole bunch of really nasty things. It wasn't even negative, it was nasty. And you can't delete reviews. So they're just there. And so it's still there, it's stuck there. Fortunately, there were some other people that had interacted with the organization that kind of defended us. And so there was sort of some positives to kind of outweigh the negative, but that still sits there and there's nothing we can do about it because you just can't delete reviews. Now, as we were talking in our group, I actually went over to, I never looked at our organization's NCEO's page, and there was one review there that was a bot spam, invest in our company, something or another, which I had never noticed. It was back in February. And I reported that as spam and blocked the person, and hopefully they'll take that down. But just negative reviews, you can't do anything about them.
What's Clean Talk? Somebody put Clean Talk in the chat.
Yeah, it's an app you can put on a site to manage some of that. We've used it on a WordPress. We use it on a WordPress site. And it's filters for some of the bot garbage.
This is Peter at Cypher. I just did a word history search on the word troll. And I'm sharing my screen. I don't know if it's successful. But in 2000 or so, it really took off. So I just sort of take from this that the entire culture is going through this, and that the peaks in the word troll in like a word history over time since 2004 are maybe possibly behind us. So, when the word troll is no longer like, oh, wow, trolling is no longer appealing even as a way to describe this because we're just tired of it, just a general fatigue. It can seem less like us against this one nasty force who just infiltrated our social.
Yeah, hi, this is Sherry. That's kind of speaks to one of the things we were discussing in my small group about the just kind of the general rise of negativity.
Yeah,
just kind of in the energy in so many social media platforms that it's not even like just directed, specific comments directed at, CAST or our centers. And so one of the things, a CAST currently doesn't have written policies, but the kind of rule of thumb is always trying to figure out, is by responding in such and such a way going to like pour gasoline on the fire or actually help extinguish something? And so like that's one of the the kind of criteria for making decisions. And one of the resources I don't have to offer, but I would love to, if there were models of, we're very aware of how unique each one of these happenings is. And I mean, like, I guess I feel envious of all of you who've like, we've never had this happen. We were on Tucker Carlson back in fall 2020. So like, we have had it happen. And like, that's a story for cocktail hour at some point. But, but knowing that these happenings are always so unique, it's like, what is the rubric to have a written policy and a coherent procedure that still allows for that kind of, specific assessment of what the kind of flexible, what the strategic move is for this happening, as opposed to having some sort of, one size fits all, which, as the UDL people, we do not like one size fits all. So like that's kind of one of my wishings, of sort of like, if I could come out of this and give something to my comms team, it would be examples of those sorts of procedures that are both like solid and flexible.
Like a flow chart.
Maybe.
I can see a flow chart, like depending on the type of communication, right? Yep. And the platform and what happens, and like a decision-making tree is what you need.
And I wanted to add something to Andrew's comment when it's a review. Very formal process from PR agencies. In the case of reviews, you have to make a clarification. You cannot make the review disappear, but you have the right to clarify and be sure that when someone goes and look at your reviews, they can actually find the reason why this happened, and they can understand, that you are not defensive, but instead you are making a clarification to be sure that people know that you listen and you understand, right? So that's always a good idea, just to keep in mind.
All right. Any other lasting thoughts or reflections from the breakout group?
This is Kelly. Kelly Suiting from CAST. Just kind of piggyback off what you just said. And sometimes these comments, they're right? So there's the accountability piece that, we have that responsibility as well. We were just talking in our group how we scheduled this webinar, and it was on a Jewish holiday, and it was an oversight, and we already had hundreds of people registered for this. And we just, we recorded it, but then also apologized, like, this was an oversight, we will do better moving forward. So that kind of helps kind of diffuse that, but sometimes they're right. So just throwing that out there. We all know that, but that was what we were finishing talking about when you ripped us out of our breakout. So now I got to finish it.
Well, that just makes me think of something that Dana said. Dana, I'm quoting you again, of thinking through before responding, especially if it's an emotional post and it charges our emotions, just taking a step back and instead of firing off. I had to say that, Dana, because I think it's really helpful for me to always remember that.
Oh, you're good. As I said, I can respond very quickly sometimes. So sitting back helps.
Yeah, it is. We all, have that in us, that we get defensive, right? But it is also important that there are so many options that can help through the process of deciding what to do. The hide comment is one of them. So you can hide, you can think, you can come back, reply, and decide if you delete block or if you are responding because it makes sense, right? That's another very important option, because even when you reply and you know that this is something that can create, a lot of controversy, it's important to know that we can hide and stop, the drama from happening, because sometimes it is like opening a door for so many hate and people coming and commenting, and making like discussions that are not necessary. So that's another good idea.
Yeah, something this makes me think about is kind of like this current context of like what gets amplified, on social media. And I think, Dana, you were alluding to this earlier, is like sometimes that negative interaction amplifies, or somebody, I can't know it, like it amplifies your voice in that space. And, maybe that's a good thing, but maybe it's a bad thing, but kind of, I think we all tend to lead with positive kind of language and sharing of resources and information, right? And so it makes it harder to get into those spaces sometimes because we're not getting amplified in the same way, because there's not that maybe potentially negative interaction. And I'm not suggesting I want to have that negative interaction happening, but I think it creates this like almost disincentive to the positive, right? Currently in the current climax with or climate with social media. And so how do we kind of handle that situation other than, just being aware that that might be a limitation to our reach and our voice in the field.
And there are also, some opportunities to things which are the things that we don't discuss, right? Because we have to also think about that. Like, for example, I'm going to use a personal example. I'm on social media. My children have grown on social media. They have Down syndrome. So something that I don't discuss, and there's no way that I will discuss, is the right for my children to be alive. So if someone comes with that, I don't want to be polite. I don't want to open the discussion. I just delete and block, and it's over. So that's the other part about this, to be sure that we know that it's okay to do that.
And I think that's where that decision tree would help, right, Sherry? Right? Because it's like, when do you delete and block versus amplify your voice in that space or correct misinformation, right? And how do you make those decisions, and some examples, and what does that look like? All right. Any other last minute thoughts before we move on?
Just knowing your organization policies, right? Because you don't want to make a decision that is contradictory to the larger organization that our work sits within, or at least having some points of reference around that. And even just like how we use our own language. Do you have an inclusive language guide that you use? And do the comments align with that? How far outside of that space do they go? Just, all those sorts of things. And then who deals with this most of the time? Knowing those people, is this something that we usually report to IT, or is this something that we take to our comms team, or is this something that we take, like those elements too? Having those details help.
I think that's important to lift up, because many of us are part of a much larger organization all in ourselves, right? We call it the nesting at NERN, because we have NERN, FPG, UNC, like it's the nesting that goes into that, and all the complications of the different policies. So thank you. All right. I think we are going to go ahead and move on at this point. As part of our ongoing conversation around social media analytics and discussions on how we can use our data, we do have Hadley Moore from the Center to Improve Program and Project Performance here today to share some information with us. Hadley, I saw you popped in. Are you ready? Do you need a few minutes?
I am ready. Thank you guys so much. And I'm coming to you from a school today, so you'll probably hear a little bit of background noise, and I apologize for that in advance. So what I'm really here today to talk to you about is an upcoming product that we're working on related to universal TA and collecting data around universal TA, and then thinking about the best ways to present and share that data back out. So my name's Hadley Moore, and I am here with CIP, which is the Center to Improve Project and Program Performance. Most of what we do is focused on evaluation. So we work with OSEP and project staff to help improve the rigor and usefulness of evaluations. I see some familiar faces I know I've worked with before. So I know you already know this, but we do work with project teams on logic models and evaluation plans. That's the band playing next to me. I don't know if you can hear that. We provide general TA. We also deliver presentations. But what we're really talking about today is our work that we do around preparing TA products, specifically focused on evaluation issues. And so what I was hoping is that I could have you guys complete a short Menti poll for me. I just want to learn a little bit more about the types of data that you're collecting now related to Universal TA, and then thinking about what your needs are in terms of thinking about like how we could best support you in moving that forward. So if you're able to, I'm going to put a link in the chat here. And then I will also, let me stop sharing this. So now we are in the Menti poll. So our first question here is, do you have a website? Right? So that was our first question, and I haven't seen it jump in a moment, so I'm going to move to our next question here. How do you collect data about Universal TA? So surveys, interviews, focus groups, data analytics, which includes Google Analytics or other types of analysis that you might do related to your website or something else. Okay, so now that that's holding steady, I'm going to move us to our next question, which is what programs do you use to collect data about Universal TA? So Google Analytics, Power BI, Tableau, or something else. Right. And then finally, how could best support you in your evaluation and also dissemination of Universal TA? So if you have any specific ideas for us on what types of support would be most helpful, that would be amazing. I'm gonna stop sharing just so we don't need to show responses, the open-ended responses to that to everybody, just in case there's something you want to share that you don't feel comfortable sharing with the group. And while you have that, I'm just going to take you quickly to, if you guys are interested in checking out some of our other resources, our products and resources are on OSEP Ideas That Work. And if you go to evaluation there, you can find the things that we've developed in the past if you are interested. And also feel free to contact us with any questions, anything coming out of this that you're wondering about. And I can drop the link to the resources in the chat as well. Have I created any questions in this short period of time? Great. Well, thank you guys all so much for jumping into the Menti so quickly like that and responding to the questions. It's extremely helpful as we think about what types of tools and resources to develop. We want to make sure we're building something that is going to, ultimately be useful to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Hadley, for joining us. Also, I want to just put in a plug. It depends, usually I'm talking to SPDIGs about these SIP evaluation tools, and there's some really great ones for them, like working with a third-party evaluator, which helps you map out how much you should think about spending on it, the kinds of agreements you should have in place, who's going to do what. That's really useful. There's some of my other favorite resources are the compared to what. We don't see enough comparisons in our, I think it's just so helpful, right? Insights is good. And then even better is, well, what did it look like at a place that wasn't receiving this service or is going to in the next year? They also have a new resource on data visualization. I know the Daisy Center has a great toolkit on that too. So something to add to that, but it's really like kind of plug, and they go into very specific details about how you would do that in your work. So I highly recommend you look through all those resources. I know Hadley's being modest, so I just felt the need to talk them up a little bit.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
This toolkit's awesome. This data visualization toolkit. Good job.
Thank you, Travis. Anyone else? Any comments?
Hi, this is Sherry. Yeah, I'm seeing Naomi's comment that I went to that same session on the data visualization toolkit, and so cosign, it's awesome. The one thing I noticed in the Menti poll is kind of the assumption that centers are doing only one thing. And so I found myself a little bit struggling with the, do you use data analytics? Yes. Do you use surveys? Yes, we do that. Do you use focus groups? When we can. So, just personally knowing that centers often are invested in collecting data from multiple sources, I found that to be kind of challenging in reflecting my center's work through the Menti poll.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful and makes a lot of sense. And it's really helpful that you shared that. So I have that in mind when I'm looking at the results. Thank you.
Same with the collection. We do collection through GA and then display on Power BI using those tools.
You can tell that Travis is passionate about this topic.
That's why I'm looking at this visualization. I'm going to go back to my dashboard.
Thank you everyone for participating. I was going to say a round of applause for Hadley. Yes, because I'm excited to talk about social media again. So today we are going to continue the discussion actually from last time. So last time we were talking about these news that are not news, but continue to be very interesting about how analytics keep changing. If you are on Twitter, probably you are very overwhelmed and frustrated at this point because it looks like you have no analytics. You don't know if they are still working. They keep telling you that they are changing. So we decided to keep talking about like what social media is telling us and how to keep talking about making decisions for the future when it comes to dissemination on social media. So I want to start by saying thank you to NCSI and NCO, Andrew is here, for letting me use this data because this is going to help us start this conversation. So as you know, or if you don't know, I work with NCSI and NCO doing social media and collecting data for them. So this has been fascinating. It's a real privilege for people who love, like social media. When Travis was talking about his dashboard, for me, it is all about, like social media and looking at numbers and trying to understand the behavior. So on NCSI, we saw in this past year that we had a growth on LinkedIn of 52%. So basically we double our followers, which is really interesting because compared to the previous year, it's actually an increase of basically 80% of followers. So LinkedIn became, like the new basically platform for us, that is really working and is basically behaving like Twitter used to behave in the past. On Twitter, our growth was really, really slow. Maybe, I can say like we didn't grow really much or even nothing because we were also losing followers, not because they are unfollowing NCSI, but because we know that people are still leaving Twitter and deciding, I should say X, right? Or deciding to go somewhere else. So we are going to be discussing that too. That is a very nice discussion. So for NCO, we saw something similar. There has been this growth of 26% on LinkedIn and on Twitter, 6%. So basically, comparing these two, NCSI and NCO, we can say that there's a similar behavior. We wanted to start the conversation with this data because we wanted to invite you to discuss these questions. That is, what has been your center's experience with social media analytics so far? If you collect social media analytics monthly, or if you do it once a year, have you seen any changes? This is a really good discussion thinking about where do we go next, right? What is going on social media? We know also that we all report, or I imagine most of us report on dissemination efforts. So what language can help us explain to our funders how this unexpected situation with X or Twitter might affect our dissemination deliverables? And this is important, especially for those centers that only use Twitter or X. They have a significant impact. So they are probably thinking about how to talk about this and explain this, or create this like language that is gonna basically explain to our funders what is going on if they don't know, right? And it's still, if they know, they probably don't understand well what is going on. So we want to invite you to work together as a team so you can discuss which will be the ideal language, or maybe if you have done it, if you would like to share that with our colleagues. Is your organization active on other social media platforms, or are you planning on joining any? And Kate was just saying, like, Daisy just started on LinkedIn, and that's a great example, right? So many people are going to other platforms, and it's important to keep discussing, like, where do we go next? So with that, Kate was saying, don't forget to follow Daisy on LinkedIn. This is such a great opportunity. So what are the pros and cons of using other social media platforms? Okay. I think we are back. So how was your discussion? Did you have fun? Anyone would like to share?
This is Travis Peterson from SID. I'll share. Our group talked a lot about the return on investment on some of these, on the effort that goes into these platforms, and we talked about how it's pretty low effort, so it's not too bad. But we also talked about some scheduling programs like Hootsuite, which sounded very interesting, to schedule out all of our social media posts to go out for a month. It sounded like we're mostly active on Twitter and Facebook, besides Andrew, who is on all the platforms, I believe.
Yes.
But he's making you do it, so it sounded like it was easy for him.
Yeah. We are so proud to say that we are in all platforms that exist, right, Andrew?
That's right. We even have videos on TikTok, Threads, Instagram, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube channel.
Oh, I mentioned I went out and got a Blue Sky account. So if anyone wants one, I can invite you to Blue Sky. It looks exactly like Twitter, and I've opened it once.
Oh, wow.
Threads, I forgot Threads. Not on Blue Sky yet. What I started to say in my group when we went to break, one thing that came to mind is that so there's the return on investment can be pretty low for the amount of time you spend. So unless you have somebody that's got the time to really spend, you have to be very judicious in how you do it. It's nice being able to schedule things at once. But what I didn't say in my group, what I started to and ran out of time, was an advantage to being on multiple platforms is multiple platforms have different audiences. So like the one lady in my group, sorry, I forgot your name, uses mainly Facebook because they communicate with parent centers, and that's the best platform for communicating with parent centers, which is true, probably, I'm sure. But then having Twitter, you're going to run into more academics. It's a big platform for academics to share their work. And so if that's your audience, then Twitter is going to be better, although you may not get a lot of parents. And then you look at LinkedIn, it tends to be the most people we connect through LinkedIn. It's our similar professionals to ourselves. So it's not parents, but it's other TA centers, other research organizations, other university folks. And so the advantage of having multiple channels is to reach different kinds of audiences, not the same audience, different ways.
Thank you, Andrew. Did anyone discuss the language to explain what is going on, or do you have any plans on doing this or any ideas?
I'm not sure that we discussed it as like the language to explain with our funders, but some of the conversation we were having is some of the challenges with the data being influenced by so many factors outside of your control. And so it's hard sometimes to look at that data and have conversation, like have confident conversations about all of it when a change in how the platform is collecting data or how other people are interacting with the platform by doing paid advertising or other things might influence how your efforts perform. So I think that's like something that like continues to be like a challenge as we grapple with like what is the other noise variables within that data that impact kind of how we look at this. And then I think there's some, in respect to that, like there's some conversation about kind of like which variables are most important for us to be looking at in order to answer certain questions, because I think a lot of times with all of these different platforms, like you can pick and choose different data stories to tell different things. And so how do we make sure that, whatever we're telling is like the right story? One of the other things that I think is interesting that we've been looking at with some of our analytics, is just like when there's outlier like experiences in a month of like, we noticed this happened, fairly recently with one of our resources, like somehow it kept getting shared on Facebook, right? And so we saw a much, like 1 month, it was just like the impact kind of and the reach was so different than any other months, and we unpacked it and it was like all from one post and all one resource, and it wasn't like we really intended to do anything different, but it must have been like something about how we framed that, something about the resource itself, resonated, or maybe it was just by chance, that people found it that day. But that kind of looking at the data that way has been helpful of like, where are people coming from? One of the other things that we've been doing with our analytics is looking at like how people come from social media, both like looking at our, in some respects, like what have we been posting, but also what other people might be looking at that is from social media driving to us. And, in some months we saw, like social media platforms in other countries that I had no idea what they were. We had to discover what kind of platform that was, but it was just like, it's interesting to kind of see like where are they driving to, and helping us understand kind of what resources might be resonating.
And that's so interesting, Amy, because as you talk about that, I think it is clear that this work is not like something that anyone can do, it's not anymore like, okay, so the receptionist or the secretary has like 2 hours free, she's gonna take care of this. This is hard work. It needs a lot of research, growing, understanding analytics, making decisions. So I think that's the other important part about this conversation, to elevate dissemination on social media and understand that it is important, and it needs someone full-time. I know that no one probably here has a full-time person, but somehow, we make it happen. So that's interesting. Thank you, Amy. The other part also, that I always remind people is like, social media, it is an investment, because probably we don't see much happening right now, but every time when we are posting, we are building this library that is going to stay there. So eventually our resources are going to be found. And that's what happens to when Amy was saying, from my experience, sometimes you have posted something in the past, and at that moment, nothing happened. And then you can see that it became viral, right? Because someone found it and they started sharing. So that's the other part about social media, is building something bigger, but we need a lot of time and investment for making that happen. With that, anyone else would like to share something else about your conversation, ideas? Okay, well, thank you. So when we send the email, the reminder, we got a response from STEMI, and they were like, oh, we are not on Twitter anymore. So we have a publication about that. We have an announcement that we are not anymore on Twitter. And that was like, oh, wow, that's awesome, right? So we were discussing that with Rebecca, and Rebecca was like, wow, we are thinking about that, but we never thought how important it is to actually announce that we are leaving Twitter. So with that, I'm gonna let Rebecca talk about that and the next steps for those of you who are thinking about doing something similar.
Thank you. So internally at CISEP, some conversations that we had around the use of X and Twitter was kind of going back to the conversation and the item that was mentioned earlier around just the negative environment that some of these platforms have attached to them. And that kind of sparked the conversation internally. Then we looked at our data. We took a look at what the pieces would look like, what the engagement rates were, who was our target audience, who was following us. We looked at all of our data, and then we also had we also took some time aligning what was going on with X and aligned it with our own organization's principles, values, philosophies, and it just wasn't matching up. Our followers were leaving the platform. It didn't feel good posting there. Our audience really, we weren't hitting the target. And so we did an analysis of all the platforms, and we decided to put more capacity into LinkedIn. CISEP's goals and the grant requirements have shifted to really bolstering implementation specialists in the education community. And it's more about skill sets and abilities of adults and really building out those systems. And so that's how we decided we made a shift. But we didn't post publicly on Twitter that we left. And some of that was intentionality because we left our profile live so that way we can continue to monitor and not lose our handle and things of that nature. And so we do monitor and keep an eye on that, but we are not actively posting, and we are putting our bang for our buck into LinkedIn. And of course, Facebook, we will always have Facebook, I think. It's just like, you can't give that up for whatever reason. But that was a shift that we had made. And I didn't know, and our process with our project officer, Jennifer left, is that, because our analytics are tied into our grant outputs and our evaluation. And so we just processed what that would look like with our evaluation team and with Jennifer before we made that shift. So it didn't have an impact on our funders, for example. So I'm just curious, is anybody else officially making a strategy shift or shifting platforms at all? What does the conversation look like?
Well, Daisy has just shifted over to LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
And very much the same reasoning that Rebecca, you spoke of, the atmosphere on Twitter. Also, Daisy is in SRI International, and our parent company had stopped posting on Twitter for the same reasons. And they didn't say, oh, you have to stop posting on Twitter, but they just said, the exact question is, does it align with our mission and what Daisy's mission and what we're trying to do? So we just started our LinkedIn page yesterday. I love STEMI's leaving Twitter notice, which that's great. Maybe we'll do that. I added our LinkedIn link to our Twitter bio. So I didn't say anything on Twitter about we're not posting here or anything. I just put in our profile, find us on LinkedIn, hint, hint. So that's where we're at right now. And we did, Grace Kelly, our principal investigator, spoke with our project people at OSEP and, expressed the concern with the difference between what's actually happening on Twitter and what Daisy's mission is. And so, they gave the go ahead as well. So, but we did actually speak to them before we made these decisions. I should clarify that.
Great. I'm laughing at Mary's comment here. Shouldn't we stop calling it Twitter? And I feel that is, like being rebellious to actually say Twitter, because we all know that it is X, right? But it feels good to keep it calling Twitter. But it is so interesting because when I saw Daisy on LinkedIn, I immediately went and looked for Daisy on Twitter. I was like, did they leave? are they still there? And I saw, the profile, but that's always interesting because I'm always, on top and want to know what is going on and if people are leaving. And I think this is such an amazing opportunity and safe place to discuss all these topics that otherwise we don't have the opportunity, to know what is going on with the other centers. So thank you so much for sharing. Rebecca, are you going to talk about homework now?
I sure am. So we're going to shift gears and heading into our next COP. We decided a topic that's kind of been bubbling up is data visualization. Between the center being here and doing some presentations, as well as talking about data analytics, and some of it's kind of a personal thing that's going on. I keep telling my researchers, stop using bar graphs. Can we move beyond bar graphs? And so working with them a little bit has been bubbling up. I'm like, this might be a good conversation. We have 2 resources for you to check out if you haven't already around data visualization. I believe one was mentioned earlier, but I'm going to pop from the Center to Improve Program and Project Performance, but I'm also going to put Daisy's in the chat. 2 resources to check out. And then please, please, please be ready with additional resources at our next COP to talk about data visualizations. Examples, resources, books, things of that nature. I put my book away, but I recently had out my favorite. It's called The Secret Language of Maps, for example. That's a good one that I love. Impact by Numbers. So start to compile your toolbox a little bit in regards to data visualizations. Bring ideas on how and thinking about ideas around social media platforms you use is working for you, but how can you also, how are you portraying your data and your successes on those platforms would be interesting to see too. I'd like to see some visualizations that we put out there for public audiences. That'd be kind of interesting to discuss. So with that, any questions or last thoughts or comments before we head out the door?
Happy Thanksgiving, right?
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. I already told Eliana, I'm like, my brain wants to go over to the holiday side of things, but I keep pushing it back over because I have a lot to do before break. So it's so hard. All right.
Well, thank you everyone for showing today. Thank you so much for interacting and sharing with us. So we are gonna see you in 2 months, right?
Yep.
January 2024, next year. We are gonna see you next year.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.